Hey guys, welcome back. In the last video we talked about where you can find assets in Tabletop Simulator to make a game with. In this video we're going to take the next step and we're going to finally turn that into a game. Alright then, let's get to it. So once you know what game you're going to be making and what assets you're going to be using, making a game pretty much comes down to positioning all those assets in the room and pretty much dressing up a table so that it looks nice so that people will want to play your game. So that's what we're going to be doing, and we're first going to take a look at a game that I made that's completely done so that you can get some idea of how I took care of the positioning for that game. So the game is called Dags of War, and you can create another single player room. And you should be able to find the game in the workshop. I already have it here, but if you don't have it, just click on browse, go find it, subscribe to it, and get it up here. And actually, while you do that, why don't you give me a 5-star rating as well? Anyways, so let's load that game. And it'll take a couple of seconds because it's a little bit bigger. And yeah, there you go. So this is Dags of War. It's actually a rethemed version of Dags of War by Simon, which is a fairly well-known Kickstarter game, but I completely rethemed it so it looks very different. But if you want to learn how to play it, that's where you can find the rules. So this game is fully scripted, which I'll talk about in a different video. But as you can see, it has a whole lot of components. There's plenty of assets here, lots of cards, lots of little itty-bitty tokens and coins, and all of those are positioned nicely in the room so that everything just looks appealing for a player to play. So the first tool that I use to get everything positioned nicely on the table in the room is a tool that you already know. It's the grid. So let me pull it up really quickly. And I'm going to set the color of it to white so that it is really visible for you guys. There you go. And if I go across the room, you'll see that, for example, these baggies are all on the intersection of two grid lines. Same for these cards. They're all positioned using the grid. So a lot of this stuff really just follows along with the grid, and I typically just use the grid for the basic layout. Now, the grid, however, is not very useful for everything. For example, these battle trackers that you have here for the game, they will go along the track that you see here. So yeah, that wouldn't really fit the grid by any means. It's because it has to go along with this stuff here. So to do that, I need to come up with something else, and there are some tricks and tools for that in Tabletop Simulator as well. So let's have a look at the other objects that you can use to position stuff in the room in Tabletop Simulator. So first off, let's hide the grid again, because else it's just going to be there the entire time. And if you zoom in on one of the battle trackers now, well, you'll notice it's locked when you try to move it. So if you hover over it and push L on your keyboard, it'll be unlocked again. You'll notice that the battle trackers actually snap to the game board. They will exactly land on these little spots on the battle tracker, which is how the game is supposed to be played. Now, of course, these spots are a lot closer together than the grid that we saw earlier, so these are not snapping to the grid. How does that work? Well, Tabletop Simulator has the point tool, and if you click on the point tool, you'll see all these spheres, and you might notice that there are two different kinds of spheres. That's because the two tools that you'll find in the point tool are the snap and the rotate snap. So what's the difference between them? Well, the snap basically just gives you a green sphere, and this will snap any object that gets close to that green sphere to that point, which is what the battle tracker was doing. The rotate snap, however, does the same thing, but it will also rotate the object that you're trying to snap to whatever rotation you specify. Now, before I get into that, I need to show you another tool real quick, which is the gizmo. Now, the gizmo is pretty similar to 3D software. It's basically a tool that shows you the three axes of the three-dimensional space. The Z tool, which is typically up, the X tool, which is typically, horizontal, and the Y tool, which is typically vertical. Right? So if you would have a two-dimensional space, it would just be X and Y, and the Z axis makes it a three-dimensional space. This works the same way in Tabletop Simulator, but there is one really big difference that you have to be very careful with and very aware of. For some reason that I don't know about, in Tabletop Simulator, the X and the Z make up the flat 2D space, and the Y is actually the height, the vertical space that goes upwards or down. Okay, so keep that in mind, and I'll show you what that actually looks like. So if I select, let's say that battle tracker again. So if I click on it with the grab tool, it'll just jump up. But if I select the gizmo tool, and I select it, you'll see that the gizmo will appear. I'm going to move this out of the way a little bit. So we have a blue arrow, which is actually, I believe, our Z. No, this is our X. So the blue is the X. We have a red arrow, which is our Z in Tabletop Simulator. And then we have our green, which is our Y. So this is different from pretty much any 3D engine that I've ever worked with or any 3D modeling software. Typically, the green one would be the Z. So if I hover over these and then click them and drag them, I can move in that direction. And there will be no snapping. Even if the grid snapping is on or you have those snapping points on your map, there will be no snapping as you're doing this. So you can put any object exactly where you want it. Now, if you let go of it and you go back to the grab tool, physics will apply to it unless you lock that object. So if you want to move an object and just have it float in space, all you have to do is lock it and select that gizmo tool, and you can just move it wherever you want. Whenever you use any of these gizmo tools that you have in here, because they have multiple options, there's one for scaling, there's one for rotating and so forth, you'll see that the transform prompt pops up. And you can use that to manually enter numbers, which you will probably use a lot to align objects because there's no other align function in Tabletop Simulator. So say, for example, I want to move the battle tracker along the vertical axis right now. That's actually the z-axis, and if I set a value here, like right now it's at minus 0.66, say I set that to 2, you'll see that it jumps up in that direction. If I put it at minus 2, you'll see it'll go into the other direction. And to show you that I wasn't lying, if I put the y value up, so let's say we make it from 2.81 to 4, you'll see that it is coming upwards, which is quite counterintuitive to what I'm used to with 3D engines. All right, now if I release that gizmo tool, as I was saying earlier, it will fall back to the ground. However, if I lock it, so now the battle tracker is locked, select the gizmo, I can still use this tool, and if I then go back to the grab, it will just float in air because it's locked. So if you ever need something that is just floating somewhere, you just lock it and you use the gizmo tool to position it wherever you like. You can do some really cool stuff with that. Just keep in mind when players unlock the tool, physics will apply again. All right, so I'm going to put that battle tracker back where it belongs, unlock it again. And yeah, so that's how the gizmo works. So let's talk a little bit more about the snapping tool then. So those points are my bread and butter to make sure everything goes where I want it to be, as you can clearly see from this board in the Dags of War game. Now I'm going to load an empty room really quickly, and then I'm going to load some objects in there, and you can just follow along, because if there's not a lot of space here for me to move objects around and show you how the snapping really works. So I'm just going to load that really quickly with the magic of pre-recorded video. All right then, so we find ourselves in a room now with a Count Dracula mini and 2 copies of the game board of the game Fury of Dracula. Now, in this game, you will be playing either as Dracula, who's going to travel across Europe, or as an investigator trying to kill Dracula. It's pretty cool. You can find the mod for it on Tabletop Simulator if you want to check it out a little bit more. Now, I am going to use this map as an example to show you how the snapping tool actually works. If I would actually make a mod for this game, I probably wouldn't implement it this way, because sometimes you can have multiple miniatures in the same spot, and having them snap to that same spot obviously will cause issues, but I still think this is a great map to use as an example for the snapping tool, so I'm just going to use it anyways. All right, so here we go. What I'm trying to accomplish here is that you can move your miniature around the map and that it'll snap to the spot of a city. So all the black spots are cities that your investigators or Dracula could traverse to. So, you know, if I would drop the miniature here, I want them to go automatically there. Now, to accomplish that, we first need to know how the snapping tool works, because it's a little quirky. So let's have a look at that. First off, if you click anywhere with the snapping tool or with the point tool that is not on an object, you can pretty much put one of those green spheres to snap anywhere. So, for example, if I want to create these green snapping spheres on the table, I can click wherever I like and they will appear wherever I clicked. Let me show you. If I select the grab tool again and bring out Dracula, he's now snapping to these spots on the table where I drew those 4 spheres. So let's remove those real quick. All right. So that's the first thing. Now, if I click on an actual object instead of on a table, it will set the point to wherever the center of the object is. So if I were to click on the map, the sphere will appear in the middle of the map. If I click on Athens here, for example, it'll still go down there. So that's no good. Let's remove that because we want to put them on all the cities, not just on the middle of the map. Sometimes it can be useful though, but not in this case. The same applies to any other object in Tabletop Simulator. If I, for example, just click on Dracula, even if I try to click on his head, it'll go in the middle of the base, in the origin point of the 3D model, if you will. And yeah, while that is still useful, sometimes it's not what you want. In this case with the map, it really isn't. Now, another thing that I also need to point out before we can get going with actually putting the dots on the map is that if you put those spheres on any object, let's do it on Dracula here. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so it's a little bit more easy to see. You'll see that the snapping tool is right there. Now, you might expect that the snapping tool will be on Dracula, or will it be on a table? Well, if we move Dracula around, you'll see that it actually happened on the table. Now, let me make 2 copies of Dracula here. So I got one here and one there, and I'm going to remove this sphere in the middle. And I'm going to lock the right one, and I'm going to keep the left one unlocked. And this might be reminiscent of when we did the tutorial with writing on cards, because the same principle applies here. If I put a sphere on an unlocked object, and I do the exact same thing for a locked object, it will interact differently. Let me show you. I'm going to unlock the right Dracula, and if I move both of them out of the way, and I click on the point interface again, you'll see that the left one actually was drawn on the table, while the right one was drawn on the model. Now, for a model, obviously, it's not always very useful to have a snapping point right on it. But for a map, however, that could be extremely useful. So how would I go about putting snapping points on all these locations in the map, combining those techniques? Well, I typically just bring out one of the models and put it where I would like it to be. And if I want to place it very precise, I can actually use the transform gizmo as well and just move it using the arrows or move it using the numerical values. So that's another thing. And then I'm start placing the points like so. Just move them around. And typically what I do is I'll just make copies. Just copy paste, and then just make sure that they are wherever I want them to be. And then you can just click them in rapid succession. And if I move them around again, and I click on this so I can see the points, you'll see that the points are now on the cities. Now, if you were paying attention, you might already realize that there's still a problem with that, obviously. Because say, I mean, this doesn't happen a lot in a mod, but say you want to move that board around, well, all those points are actually attached to the table. So to finish this little exercise with the map that I wanted to do, the actual solution would be to first you log the map, and then you bring your Dracula figures out, put them on the different spots. This guy is a little bit more elusive than the others. And you know, you would do this for the entire map. It is a little bit time consuming. And then you just click on them, make sure the Draculas are not locked because else the points will go on the Draculas. You move them out of the way. And if you look at the points, they're right there. If I try to move the map, it won't do anything. But if I unlock it and move it, those points are now attached to the map itself. So that is how the snapping tool works. So keep in mind, the locking is extremely relevant whenever you're using the snapping tool. Because if you make your game, you probably want to do it so that you can still move the board with all the snapping points attached to it. So that's a really big part of setting up your game, making sure you position everything carefully. And if you use these techniques that I've shown you in this video, you'll probably get quite far in setting up your room. Now, before you can actually publish your game and put it on the Tabletop Simulator servers, you probably want to add some extra information, maybe information about how you implemented the board game or where they can find certain objects that they would expect to find to be able to play the game and so forth. So how would you communicate that kind of information? Well, Tabletop Simulator has a couple of ways to communicate text to players. One of them is the edit note feature in the lower right corner. So if you click on that, you can actually write in this field, and it's probably the first thing people will see whenever they open your mod, so put the most important information there. Then there is the notebook. The notebook has a page that is hidden for every player, which can be very convenient. There is a section for rules, and you can add your own rules to it as well. I typically use that to copy paste most of the rule book of the game if I can find it somewhere in there, because it's just very convenient that people can just open up the rule book in Tabletop Simulator directly. And then finally, if there's anything you want to write on the board, they do have a text tool. You can select it here and then you can click anywhere and you can just type like so. You can change the color, you can change the size. I don't think you can do much about the font or anything, but yeah, that's pretty much how that works. If you need to move it around, select the gizmo tool and you can move it around like you would anything else. I haven't used it that much, just for some minor notes left and right, but if you need text in Tabletop Simulator, that's where you will go to find it. Now finally, if you want to bring in the actual rulebook, it's a little bit extra work, but I can show you how I would go about doing that. So I need to get out of Tabletop Simulator first, and I'm going to open the PDF of a game. In this case, it's going to be Hive, and because it's a short rulebook, and I'm going to export everything in here to JPEGs. I'm just going to save this on the desktop because I need a JPEG of every individual page of the game. So there you go. Right now I have every page of Hive in here. So then I open up Tabletop Simulator again, and I'm going to create some objects. So I'm going to make a component, and I am going to go to custom, and I'm going to turn them into tiles. So I'm just going to use a box style, that's fine. And my top image is going to be page number 1. And just for the sake of this, I'm going to keep everything local, but if you're using it, you probably want to make it so that it's on the cloud. And yeah, I'm just going to make it page 1 everywhere. Thickness is fine, doesn't have to be stackable, and import it. Okay, so that gives me a version of the first page of the Hive manual. Now I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see. So here we go. A game crawling with possibilities. So now I'm gonna make a copy of that, and I'm gonna right click it, click on custom, and I'm gonna bring in the second page of the file. Again, I'm just gonna keep things local because I don't want this to go on my cloud. And it's asking me, I found one matching object. Do you also want to update them to match? Well, if I press update now, it's going to change the image for the other page because Tabletop Simulator detected that this is a copy from the other page, and I don't want that. I want the images to be different. So I'm going to click on cancel here so that they stay the same. All right, so now I have 2 pages of the manual of Hive in here. I think I'm going to make a third one really quickly just to illustrate my point, because I think it'll make things slightly clearer. So doing the same thing, keeping things local, copy pasting, importing, cancel, and that's the third page of the game Hive. And these are basically very, very big tiles right now. And if I flip them, I have the same page on the other side, which is not really that important, but that's how we're doing it right now. Now, if I select all of these, so selecting multiples of them entails that you're holding down the control button while clicking them with your left mouse button. And I then right click them and click on create states. It'll turn them into a single object. And this is how people typically make manuals in Tabletop Simulator. So you'll see now when I hover over it, it says 1 of 3. And if I go to the state, you can set it to state 2 to get page 2, set it to state 3 to get page 3. You can use the numeric keyboard and go through it like so. And now you have the entire manual of an actual game in Tabletop Simulator. Anyways, that's more than enough information on how to put rules in your game. And I think you guys are pretty much ready now to make your own game or to get somebody else's game in Tabletop Simulator if you choose to do so. Anyways, I think what we need to do next is just show you how you can put it on the server. And that's actually pretty straightforward. So let me show you that by uploading this amazing game that has the rules of Hive, the board of Furia Dracula, and some weird text everywhere. And let's put that on the Steam servers for Tabletop Simulator. So to do that, you click on modding and then you click on Workshop Upload. You can give it a title here, and I'm just going to call it Weird. And workshop description, anything goes here. And that's what I'm going to write. You also need a thumbnail URL. So you need an image. If you don't put anything in there, it won't upload. So we need an image, and well, we have all these weird pages for the Hive manual. So let's use that as our thumbnail. Now, since it's going to go on the cloud, we probably want to put this on the cloud as well. So let's upload it. And there we go. It also gives you the option to add tags. If you want people to find your game, it's important that you do that. So if you want to put some information in here about the game, what kind of game it is, if it's a game, if it's just objects, how complex it is, anything you like that helps people to find your game. Up to, this is a miniature game. I have a miniature of Dracula. So there you go. Then you can just click upload. It'll say it's beginning to upload, and it shouldn't take too long. There you go. It'll tell you everything uploaded successfully, and it'll give you this number and tell you to never ever lose this because it's really important. Now, you can totally forget about that number. It's very easy to find it again. So you can just click on OK here. Okay, so you press Shift and Tab to get to this overlay, and then you click on View Community Hub. You click on Workshop, and then you should see your workshop files. So if you hover over your files there, you can click on Files You've Posted. And then you should see all the many mods that you've been working on, including the mod that you just uploaded. In my case, that weird hive mod that I just made. So when I click on that, I can change a couple of things about it. I can edit the title and the description. In the description, you typically want to write some more information about the game because it's also searchable. You also might want to add some extra images and videos to get people excited about the mod that you made and to ensure that they'll pick your mod over another mod to play. And then there is add and remove contributors. Now, I was hoping that this would allow you to collaborate with people, but it doesn't really do that at all. The only thing it does, it lets you add a friend that has collaborated on your game to the Steam page. So if you click on it, you just see your friend list and you can invite them. If you end up inviting them, tell them to look in their email, because that's where I typically found the invites that I got whenever I was a collaborator or contributor on a mod. Next, you can edit some links, which are basically links like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, that kind of stuff. You can allow or disallow comments. You can delete the mod if you want. There is adding DLC. That is not DLC for your mod. It is if they have bought DLC within Tabletop Simulator, for example, official mods or DLC, and you used assets from official mods, you need to let people know that they're going to need to buy those to use your mod. And then finally, there's the most important button, the visibility. This is very similar to YouTube. If you set it to public, anybody can search on the Tabletop Simulator search engine and find your game. If you send it to friends only, only your friends can do that. If you set it to hidden, nobody can find your mod, not even if you give them the URL. And if you set it to unlisted, you can basically right click in this field and copy the page URL, and then paste the address, the URL address of your Tabletop Simulator workshop page for your mod, and give that to people so that they can find it exclusively. So if you have a game that, I don't know, uses some assets that you don't have intellectual property rights for or something, you can just set it unlisted and send it to people that you want to play it, or if you're working on a game that only a select group of people should be seeing. And finally, there's some stats there on how many people have visited your mod. In this case, just one, me. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it to get your game on the workshop. We'll talk about publishing in more detail in another video, but that wraps up this video. So now you know how to set up your room and get your assets in there and finish a game. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.